Hi, my name is Alex Whitney. This is Conspiracy 101, and today we're going to be looking into Conspiracy 58. So this is a bit of a different one. We're going to take a different angle to it. But Conspiracy 58 revolves around the idea that the 1958 World Cup that happened in Sweden didn't necessarily entirely happen in Sweden, for reasons we'll get into, and that there's been a cover-up, and it was basically just a propaganda, kind of like a Cold War propaganda push by mainly the Americans, but obviously with many of the European countries on board as well. Some people, there's a few different variations of it. Some people say that it didn't happen in its entirety. Some people say that it was staged in America, in LA. Some people say it was some games were put on or fixed in certain ways to make certain countries look better. If you don't know, the 1958 final was Brazil versus Sweden, and it was the one where Pelé was really, really young, and he was, an up-and-coming star. And it was basically a push to make the Soviet bloc look bad through sports, which was, I guess, in the 50s and more so later on, was really what the Soviets wanted, wasn't it? It was they used to push their ideologies through sports, and they used to be top at certain sports. You think of Olympics and stuff like that. And there's lots of different conspiracies when it comes to sports, and this is just one of them. The Olympics, obviously, there's lots of different variations of Olympic conspiracies with certain nations not going to certain Olympics and for what reasons, etc., etc. I'm sure we'll get to those in the future, but this is Conspiracy 58, and it's called Conspiracy 58 because a Swedish is where it starts. Is in Sweden. Most of the sources come from Sweden. There is a group called KSP, and if we go to it now, picture of the week. That's a blast from the past. Where'd you come from? So change that. There we go. What is with all these? There we go. I accidentally clicked picture of the week for some reason, and it's going to come up on all the overlays, isn't it? Oh, it didn't come up on that one. Okay, good. Right, so this is the main website that I could find. It's in Swedish. We will translate it using Google. But yeah, we're not starting with Wikipedia, which is, I'll get to that in a bit. We will read the Wikipedia article near the end. But first, let's watch... Go away, pick of the week. We don't do that anymore around here. The trailer. This is a Swedish documentary about KSP 58, which was called Conspiracy 58 in the UK, or in English. But it's I can't remember what it's called. Conspiration 58, I think, is Swedish. I have watched this documentary. We're not going to watch it in this video because, copyright. But we can watch the trailer. We'll watch the trailer. One thing I did learn from the documentary is that it's from 2002, so quite old. But bomb in Swedish is bomb. Beautiful. Right, let's mute me.
Parling brant framåt till Gren tar ner den. Fint vänder han inåt nu. Ska spela vart då, spela bakåt till Lidehåll.
Det var mycket som inte var det som det först såg ut som. När man lättade på det så var det många gånger som man lyfter en sten och gråsuggarna väller ut.
Håller den i alla fall, drar sig ut på högerkanten, spelar bakåt till Börjesson igen. Börjesson tar emot den, vickar fram den till Hamrin, och Hamrin står och väntar nu.
Jag har fått ett intryck av att det är en växande rörelse som försöker bevisa någonting som enligt vår mening är felaktigt, och då måste vi gå till motoffensiv.
Först nu, och då accelererar Hamrin, håller bollen fortfarande och tränger chefen på.
Det finns heller inga trovärdiga vittnen som kan belägga att fotbollsspelen skulle ha ägt rum.
Hamrin håller bollen i alla fall, lekande till två man. Vilka ser till att du han spelar i mål! Ja! Oj, 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 oj. I mål! Scenerna här på Nya Ullevi kan absolut inte beskrivas på något vis. Och ett sånt cirkusnummer, så fantastiskt nummer utav Hamrin, som obekymrad gick och lallade med bollen för att locka tyskar på sig. Och så när de kom så finns han förbi först den ena och sen den andra på ett sånt lysande sätt att man bara sitter och gapar.
So that is the documentary trailer. You can buy it through Vimeo. Is it Vimeo? I don't know how to pronounce it. Go away, pick up a week. Oh my gosh. Would you just leave me alone? Yeah, Vimeo. Ah! 9! You saw my book, Mother. How embarrassing. Yeah, you can. You can buy stuff through Vimeo. I did not know that was a feature. Anyway, it's 4x3, which is really awkward to capture on. Yeah, so it's an older document. It's gonna remove that, and because what it's doing, I'm just gonna remove them all. What it's doing is when I turn it off on one, it's turning it on the other. There we go. So now it's not there on any of them. Right. Back to the point. You can buy stuff on Vimeo, whatever it's called. I did not know that. You can watch this on YouTube. You can find it on YouTube. Just type in Conspiracy 58 English subtitles. You can find it and you can watch it. The main thing I want to take away is this is the main sort of, I guess not the leader, what's the word for it? The spearhead, the figurehead of the movement. And he's been doing this for a very long time. He's written a book about it. I'm not sure if that book's been translated into English. It's Swedish. And as you can see, the trailer doesn't really go into much about like evidence, but the actual documentary does. But the website, which is still backed up on archive, it's been taken down now. If you go on conspiracy58.com or whatever it was, it's not there anymore. But you can go on the archive.org, which is what we're doing now. So this is it, Conspiration 58, and it is in Swedish, but we can translate it into English. Yes, we can. Cool. So this might be a bit janky, but we'll go through it, and this website does have proof. It also has different pictures and history and introduction and stuff. So we'll read through it, we'll go through it, and yeah, and we'll see what it says. Obviously, the documentary itself is a lot more watchable compared to reading this, but we'll go for it. So, Sweden's television, and this goes into not just the proofs, but why? Why would they conspire to fake an entire World Cup or parts of it? Sweden's television does not give up. Now it is the Malmo editors who dig up 2-year-old documentary. The film will be shown on. Oh, there we go. So that's just talking about the actual documentary. New photo evidence of Swedish Football Association and Sweden's television in collusion with FIFA and the CIA. News from the net, despite SVT's claims. Okay, so that's probably when it was taken down. Words from the chairman. So that's just people. He's the chairman. He's sort of. He hasn't done the research, but he's the figurehead of the organisation. And in Sweden, the reason I know what bomb is in Swedish, bomba, is because they've been quite militant about it, which is scary. But I guess that makes sense. Is that just the homepage? If I click on start, default. Yep. Are we gonna have to? It's an introduction. Are we gonna have to right click and? We might have to. Oh, it's having a moment. Oh. I've never seen the Wayback Machine do this. It's like going through, you can't see it. It's going through all the different versions and loading. Is it loading each one? No, okay, good. Why? Why are you doing that? Okay. So introduction doesn't work. Fair enough. History does. Cool. Right, let's translate to English. The truth must come out. Conspiracy 58 knows that the Football World Cup 58 was a small pawn in the world political game between the great powers. We know that everything we saw on TV, read in newspapers, or heard on the radio was a well-directed spectacle where only very few in Sweden knew the truth. We know that witnesses, the media, and the government today are doing everything to ensure that this lie remains intact. We also know that today more and more of us realise the truth. One of the strong points that they argue is that, one, Sweden financially couldn't have done that. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of money to be able to host the World Cup. And Sweden is a very... It's not poor, but they're... I don't know, it's hard to explain, but their stadiums aren't as world-renowned as some of the other countries that might have been competing for it. So why was Sweden chosen? That was a really big one. And then another side of it is the footage and the photos and the evidence that is available isn't very good. The opening ceremony wasn't recorded in video at all. And this is 58. This is, this is good 20, 30 years past the introduction of televisions and stuff like that. So it really should have been recorded. There should have been, tangible evidence. Instead, it's a voice. It's like a audio recording, which is easier to fake, isn't it, than video? Since the beginning of history, man has deceived, manipulated, and created fictitious truths to fulfill his own interests. Just open any history book. Ooh. Staging a football championship is not quite an easy game, but it is quite possible. The question many people ask is why this was done. The answer is complicated. Brother Jacks has thoroughly elaborated the theory on this in his book. During the 50s, the days of the Cold War prevailed in the world. The power struggle between East and West was perhaps at its hottest during this time. On all levels, they tried to break their opponents and be superior to him. Religious, political, in space, geographical, ideological, and media. The space race was going on at the same time that the Western powers realised the power of controlling the media. If you could control TV, newspapers, and radio, you could also control the little person. Now, you could reach everyone with any information you wanted, false or true. As a prelude to the media race that was now initiated, a big test was made, the Football World Cup in 1958. Was it possible to direct a sporting event like a film or a TV show without the viewers discovering the hoax? Yes, of course it's possible, according to Brother Jacks, is the guy who wrote the book. The Western powers were not alone in this, but took help from both FIFA, TV industry, and I guess the CIA. If you don't know, in the 1950 World Cup, it was Brazil-Sweden in the final. So you got this, what Russians might see as an inferior country in Brazil, doing really well, and then a European power also being equal to. So these are the board 30th anniversary pictures, one of the many fake photos. There's quite a few in the proof article, there's quite a few different fake photos and showing some of the, in the documentary as well, it shows some of the old Photoshop techniques that they would use. And this is this is a thing, you can go back and see the style in photos where he slowly chops people out of the photos. And it's done manually rather than with computers like it is now. Our association, a year after the 1958 World Cup, so it's been going around for a long time. 70s was when it really took off, I think. History article pictures? Don't know if that'll work. Artiklar? No? Okay. Fair enough. And bildbevis, which is proof. I haven't done up my top button. My God, this is what a stream. Right, why are you going all weird? Why? This was working perfectly. This is just typical, isn't it? Why are you doing it like that? Usually it doesn't do it like that. That's so strange. Right, I'm just going to freeze it for a second and see if I can get it working. Because what usually happens, it's like, yeah, it's going through loads of different versions of it rather than just the one. So let's go back. Let's just go straight to the Wayback Machine and just see what... Oh no, I don't want the whole... Just want... There we go. Right, and see what... Right, so it does have copies of it. Yes, one snapshot. That's all I need. Perfect. That's so strange. That's spooky when you're looking at conspiratorial stuff and then it doesn't work, even though it's worked before. Right, so photographic evidence. These are little snapshots at the data, and rather than just, broader whole thing. We can sort of pinpoint a few little things, and then they all add up. It's not necessarily a conspiracy where, you know, there's one smoking gun. Photographic evidence. Over the years, images have come to our attention that prove the gigantic hoax that is the '58 World Cup. We have tried to get many of them published in larger contexts, but we have always been denied this publicity. Below are some of the most famous photographs. Also, the copyright holders. That can be really hard when you're doing photographs and you're trying to get them out and published. The copyright holders will just say no. Websites are a little bit different. So, this photo is taken from, let's zoom out a little bit just so we can see it easier. So this photo was taken in spring of 1958 outside Los Angeles. The photograph comes from a geologic survey, but later overflights over this place were banned. What we see is a construction site and the foundations of a football stadium, but why is this an inaccessible place? Why is photography prohibited here? Google Maps does this a lot. You'll see areas and you zoom in and it'll just be a black square. And it'll either be the Americans, so the US government saying, no, don't do that, or other countries, or sometimes it's the Americans saying, don't show what we have footage of another country. And there's loads of examples of that where basically it's void. The aerial photography, usually not satellites. Satellite imagery is very good, but Google doesn't necessarily have access to the really good satellite imagery. They're just over flights. They're flights and they go back and forth, kind of like the Google cars, and they are just blacked out. So this is an example. Construction in LA, and that'll make more sense in a second. So after one of the goals, the camera pans, and you see it briefly in that trailer, and it pans to show the stadium. Unfortunately, it caught something else in the background, and that's these buildings here, which don't exist. They do exist, but this is the most famous photographic evidence in existence. The black and white images 1.1 and 1.2 are excerpts from a film sequence for the alleged Ullevalla Stadium. In a momentary panning done by the cameraman, two buildings are seen on the left in the picture outside the stadium, but these buildings are not found outside Ullevi, but you can find them in New York. Oh, it's not even LA. I thought it was LA. It is remarkable that the original film has disappeared. However, fortunately, copies have been found, so people took copies of the TV broadcast. This is a really interesting one. So in the great euphoria surrounding the football party, not everyone was careful to look into the details. In later investigations, it has been established that the sun shadows sometimes fell in unreasonable ways because of being played in Sweden. This is one of them. The man in the white shirt is Nakaskolund. I guess one of the things. Basically, because of the lines of latitude and longitude, where you are will dictate how the shadows affect, where the sun angle is, the angle of the sun. And Sweden is quite high, it's northern latitudes. Whereas LA and New York aren't. The UK is kind of in line with Canada. That's the way I usually think of it. So UK is in line with Canada, so Sweden is going to be higher, but it's not going to cast as long a shadow at certain points. I think that's the point they're trying to make. It's not as long as it is seen in certain images. Another interesting image that, in addition to incorrect sun shadows, shows a detail worth noting. All of the journalists sitting in the goal, there is no news media today that can confirm that this is one of their photographers sitting there. So they're really close. There's some really good evidence of, so this is in the documentary, but might not show, some of the people who are playing in the games, like being scored against and smiling and acting jovial, which you wouldn't see in a World Cup nowadays, suggesting that the games are fixed. Just the way the audience is and the cameras and the way the camera pans is very odd. And they haven't shown this one, but there is a photo that was published in various newspapers at the time, showing some of the action, and you can clearly see it's photoshopped. It's been cut out of a different photo and then put into that place. I think it's a goalkeeper. I don't know, that's about the TV industry store, so I guess that's to get the thing, the forum. And that's basically it. You can contact them. There are some links. Is this going to work? Or is this going to cycle through them all? Lanka. So originally there were various other organisations around the world which were coming to the same conclusions, basically. And the fact that the Brazilians who won were coming to similar conclusions is kind of scary. You can get a shirt, that's pretty cool. So this is the Swedish team that apparently got to a final. It's got articles from the BBC, and yeah, it's weird. I've tried a few of these links, none of them work anymore. They're either broken or they've been removed, which is really interesting. Okay, so that is, in a nutshell, what Conspiracy 58 is. It is the idea that the USA, mainly, because that's where it was, some of the matches were held, if not all of them, conspired with Sweden, the CIA, FIFA, in order to make the Soviets look worse than they were, for the reasons of propaganda, for sporting propaganda, in a similar way that has happened lots and lots of times throughout, you think of the Olympics and during the Cold War. Same kind of idea, but they were trying to see if they could manipulate the media. And the Swedish went along with it, and it was a way of testing the waters. Whether it's happened, with other events, is yet to be seen. So let's now that we know what Conspiracy 58 is, let's have a look at the Wikipedia page. And if you've been reading any Wikipedia articles recently, you know that they've changed their layout and it's god awful, but you just have to put up with it. This article is in English though, which is good. So, look at this, it's stupid. It looks like when you accidentally get the mobile version up of Wikipedia in a browser. So, Conspiracy 58, Conspiration 58, KSP 58 is a Swedish mockumentary from 2002, produced by Sveriges Television, the Swedish public broadcaster. The film examines the fictional KSP 58 movement that claims that the 1958 FIFA World Cup in Sweden did not really take place, but was faked and exists only as forged television and radio coverage in a conspiracy between American and Swedish television, the CIA, and FIFA as part of the Cold War. In the film, it is said that Sweden do not have the economic or technical resources to actually host such a large event. In the plot, the American motive for doing this was to test the effectiveness of televised propaganda. When the film originally aired, the audience was not told in advance that it was a mockumentary, giving the impression that Conspiracy 58 was a regular documentary film. Plot. A large amount of evidence is presented. For example, there is analysis of television recordings of the matches, where houses can be seen in the background but never actually stood there. The film also analyses how the shadows of players in the field were falling and were angled in a way that is not possible in Sweden given the position of the sun at the time. The chairman of the KSP8, Bra Jacques de Verne, who was employed by the Swedish National Agency for more than 20 years, states that he looked for evidence that the tournament really took place, but didn't find anything. After the end of the film, it was revealed that the film was a mockumentary. The aim of the film, according to the director Johan Lodsved, was to illustrate how historical revisionism, in particular Holocaust denial, works and to highlight the importance of source criticism when getting information, for example, the media. The majority of the characters in the film are real celebrities who are playing themselves. So, in case you haven't cottoned on yet, Conspiracy 58 is not a conspiracy. It is entirely made up. And it is done to prove a point that conspiracies are abound. There are so many, and you really have to be critical of what sources and media you accept, both in mainstream but also in the alternate press. This is a really, really good, well-made documentary. It uses real people, real Swedish players, the UEFA president from 1990 to 2007, and really portrays the conspiracy in a way that you might see a conspiracy being portrayed in the media. It's very clever and it's very well done. That's why I wanted to talk about it, because there are lots and lots of conspiracies out there that aren't conspiracies. We like to, on Conspiracy 101, look at the funny ones, look at the ones that are a bit weird, also look at the ones that have been proven to be true. Some of them are scary, some of them are horrific, and that includes the ones that are actually true. But in all of those, you really need to do some research. You can't just take things at face value, and that's what this documentary really highlights. That even if something is well made, you still need to, think about it and maybe do your own research. The way it's put forward is really clever, because what it really does is it parallels the Holocaust denial movement, and quite a few things that are said in the documentary really ring true. The people who were there in 1958 to watch the World Cup games are, during this in 2002, dying, are more than likely now dead. You think that 60 years ago, there would have been either they're really old now, or dead now, or children when it happened. And the idea is that parallels the people who were there and witnessed the Holocaust, either as prisoners or as liberators. And one of the things that happened when concentration camps and evidence of the Holocaust was put forward was the real effort to document it. Because people at the time knew that people would, the Germans more than likely would say, no, we didn't do that. That's not what happened. Luckily, Germany as a whole has come away from the Second World War well, if you can. They've admitted their mistakes. They've learned their lessons, and they've become a stronger country, I think, for it. But there was definitely a generation that didn't think like that. And I think it took until the 60s and 70s for really the next generation to look at what happened and realise that it was horrific and wrong. Other countries who had similar war crimes, of similar patterns of horrific scale. See, Holocaust is a great word, but it's not always appropriate for other things. They don't always admit, hold their hands up and try and, work out a solution to what's gone wrong in the past. Countries, you can't be held to your ancestors. You can only do what you can do. I am English, aka British, and Britain and its empire has done some horrific things. But again, it's how you move on from that. It's how you work with the countries that you've done horrific things to. And a lot of the British Empire's independence movements is at least a high point of some of those awful atrocities that happened. So we're going to click on historical revisionism, aka negationism. I guess that's like the nicer word that they want to use. Also called denialism, is falsification or distortion of the historical record. It should not be conflated with revisionism, a broader term that extends to newly evidenced, fairly reasoned academic reinterpretations of history. Oh, there you go. So I didn't know that. So you've got denialism, but you also got revisionism in that you can look back at the history and go, actually, we weren't right about that. The Romans, they didn't use jet skis. We were wrong. Actually, they used it was a type of hovercraft. So we, have to hold your hands up and say, we got that wrong. This is saying that it didn't happen. So there are a bunch of different examples, which I'm gonna say, and therefore get this video flagged, but I'm not necessarily going to go into them. So the California genocide, that's the one when the white Americans or the European Americans went across to California and just killed all the natives, all the indigenous peoples. Holocaust denial, Armenian genocide denial, lost cause of a confederacy, so that's the Confederacy revisionism. The myth of clean Wehrmacht, Japanese history textbook controversy, so a lot of that has to do with the the Sino-Japanese War. Again, that's something I will get into because I do like my history in terms of wars. And that's a really interesting one because the conspiracies really do bleed into modern day. The Holodomor denial, which is the Ukrainian Holocaust? Famine in Soviet Ukraine, yeah. So that's the Russians. Historiography in the Soviet Union, so the history of history in the Soviet Union during the Stalin era. Stalinism changed a lot of things. So there's lots of different notable historical negationists, including some really famous people like Shinzo Abe, who was the Prime Minister of Japan for a while before his death. 1984 obviously gets brought up a lot because that's a fictional story that depicts this kind of stuff happening. So you can see that all of this is in depth. Japanese war crimes. So Croatian war crimes, Serbian war crimes, Yugoslavia as a whole. That's a really interesting and very touchy subject for a lot of people. If you watch football, if you watch international football, bringing it back to Conspiracy 58, then you'll know that the former Yugoslavia countries, so I'm not going to list them because I miss one and then I'll get people annoyed at me. Pretty much across the board, all of them did bad things to each other at some point. Very few of them get out clean without their hands being muddied. But that's war, and it's where that line is crossed, isn't there? You can look at something that was like the Second World War and the Nazis. You can look at something that says they were bad. But that doesn't mean the Allies didn't do bad things as well. You can't just scrub that clean and say, oh no, they haven't done bad things either. You need to acknowledge that war is not a nice thing, and often individuals make decisions about what happens to large areas of land and peoples, and individuals can make mistakes. Turkish, Armenian, yeah, Iran. Oh, okay, so that's a religious sort of, not necessarily genocides all the time, but religious mistreatments. Soviet history is always going to be a one. Azerbaijan in terms of Armenia, in relation to Iran. North Korea in the Korean War. That's a really interesting one. And then obviously the massive one is Holocaust denial, which is what the 1958 Conspiracy 58 was trying to put forward, those ideas. Obviously, you've got the Chinese democracy. North Macedonia. Is this just changing the name? Yeah, okay, so yeah. So Greece and Macedonia, and what is Macedonia, what is Greece, has always been a bit... Greece and Turkey, Greece and Cyprus, Greece and Macedonia. It's always been a bit fractious. So part of Greece is called Macedonia, so they never wanted the country of Macedonia to be called Macedonia. So it was always called the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. And now it's called North Macedonia. They've come to an agreement on that. But so Japan textbooks and again, rewriting what happened. Also, you can not necessarily rewrite, but you can reword certain things to make things seem less bad. So one of these within Japan, during their Chinese occupation, especially in Manchuria, they had lots of rape, basically, and calling them comfort women rather than saying that rape happened is it's one of those little minor changes that really changes the way that people see it. Pakistan and India are always going to have, South Korea, again, that's during the Korean War. something I am interested in and have read about, and I'm sure it'll come up in some point. Turkey and Armenians, Yugoslavia in its entirety, the war and Tito era, even before the war. A denial of Muslim conquest in the Iberian Peninsula. How can you possibly deny that? They built mosques. A spin-off of vision of history espoused by inclusive Spanish nationalism, built in opposition to the national Catholic brand of Spanish nationalism. Okay, first point, 1974. Spain's a really weird country in that it had a dictator quite far into the 20th century, more so than you'd expect. Postulated later adopted by certain Andalusian nationalism. Very strange. That's a strange one. Indigenous people in Australia. Yeah, indigenous people everywhere. Basically, you could argue, you could go through the indigenous people of the UK. No one is purely indigenous anymore. In the UK, in the British Isles. We were invaded and taken over by so many different countries, from northern France, like Normandy and Brittany, to Flanders, so like Belgium and the Dutch, and what they became, the Danish and the Scandinavians with the Vikings. This country was a real melting pot. And then even earlier than that, the Romans. One of the reasons why Britain is so strong is because of our weird history, in terms of exploitation by various Europeans, and then our exploitation of various world countries during the British Empire, and that's allowed our country to be a real mix of different, not just like peoples, but also everything's all up and down all over the place. Like, we kind of like metric, but also we're the only people in the world who does our weight in stone. Like, I have no idea what my weight is in kilograms or pounds, but I know it in stone. And I'll do my cars, I'll do it in miles, but then I'll have no idea what like 9 foot is. But I know my height in feet. It's just, we're all over the place. And a lot of that, especially our language, which is very strange that it caught on so well, is a mix of lots of different other languages, and we loan words all the time without realising it. But yeah, anyway, moving on. That was a tangent and a half. International law, domestic laws, in fiction, and a bunch of other thingies. So that's one of the reasons why I left the Wikipedia article to last, is because it gives away the point of this episode. And this is an episode that I think I will reference more so in the comments. I get so many comments on my conspiracy videos that are amazing. Some of them are full on, this conspiracy is true. Some of them are in on the sort of like, this conspiracy is a wink wink, nudge nudge. And then there's a bunch of people in the middle who are just sort of fascinated by it all, which is kind of where I sit. I don't like to always go, this conspiracy is stupid, I don't like it. But also I don't want to fully espouse a conspiracy. Unless it's a conspiracy that has actually happened. This is a weird one, because this is a conspiracy that really didn't happen. But I can see in a few years, maybe people thinking that this is actually a false flag, that they've put this out here as a, not as a joke, but as a mockumentary, in order to highlight the fact that it really is a conspiracy. And one of the things this always reminds me of, and what I'll leave this video on, is the Illuminati. The Illuminati is a huge conspiratorial topic. It's so many different books, so many different articles, and documentaries, and videos like this for discussing it and what the Illuminati is. And the Illuminati did exist, but the Illuminati is a conspiracy theory in which they control large parts of media, etc., etc. Is mostly from a Playboy article from which the modern interpretation of the ancient society of Illuminati, well, not ancient, a few hundred-year-old society of the Illuminati, was given its modern veneer. And it was done on purpose as a joke to see if it would catch on. And this reinterpretation of the Illuminati and whether or not it would. And it snowballed into something that I don't think the original authors of that Playboy, or author of that Playboy article, really could foresee. And maybe one day, Conspiracy 58 will take over like that. I doubt it, but you never know. The world is weird. Thank you very much. If you made it all the way through, I appreciate that. I appreciate all the views that I'm getting at the moment. I really like it. It's nice to see other people enjoying the same weird nonsense that I enjoy. And I shall see you again next week for another episode. Thank you very much. Goodbye.